Cześć, jestem Wojtek z IGN Polska, jest tu ze mną Mikem Pondsmithem. Hi Mike.
Hi IGN.
Okay, so Mike, can you tell me a little bit about your role in creating Cyberpunk 2077?
I'll do my best. Remember that there's some things I can't tell you or I'll have to shoot you. Got it?
Do you have a gun nearby?
I don't need a gun. I have cyberware.
Okay.
Be prepared. All right. My role is basically a combination of advisor and a lot of kind of technical look over and that sort of thing. One of the things that impressed us most about CDPR was that they are fans of the original Cyberpunk, and so they want to make it exactly or as close as they can to that right feel. One of the things they didn't know when we first started working together was that I actually worked for quite a long time in video games before. I was at Microsoft and a number of other studios, and I actually started in video games years and years ago at a company called California Pacific, way back in California. So that meant that I could get a lot more involved than most people who would be doing a license. I could actually give them advice or comments at least, because I'd had to do it before. So it's been a very interesting partnership, actually.
Okay, so how do you think will Cyberpunk 2077 come up as a game in comparison to other games that are set in the same world, in Cyberpunk world?
One of the things that has always distinguished the original Cyberpunk from most of the other Cyberpunk games is that from the beginning we've had a very, very strong connection with actual Cyberpunk authors. For example, even before we released the game, Walter John Williams, who had Hardwired, was one of the playtesters and also contributed by writing the Hardwired supplement for us. George Alec Effinger, a lot of people like that have all been there actively involved. So we've tried to keep that feeling, and that makes Cyberpunk unique. And if we can transfer that to 2077, then what you'll get will be something that's not like Cyberpunk, it'll be Cyberpunk.
Okay. So can you tell me how similar will Cyberpunk 2077 be to Cyberpunk 2020?
Actually, it's much more surprisingly similar than I even expected. I remember the first time they showed me some of the stuff on the trailer, and I was laughing because there were things that were shout-outs all over the place. Signage in the windows, graffiti on the streets, patches on the Night City PD that were all exactly the things that we had done years earlier, which showed how much care and attention they were putting into it. Subsequently, since we've been working together, there's a lot of things that you'll automatically recognize if you're a fan of Cyberpunk 2020. And even if you're not, and it's the first time you come into the world, you'll be able to see a very, very deep world because they've mined the dozens and dozens of books we've done over the years.
So it's been a while since you've created Cyberpunk 2020. Do you think that the vision of the future, the Cyberpunk vision of the future, has changed since then?
About the only thing that's really changed is it's gotten a lot more Cyberpunk out there. We used to joke about some of the things that were happening, and we were pretty good at calling it. In fact, there's a running joke in the industry that for some reason I'm very good at reading the future, but I somehow can't make money doing it. I keep saying, if I'm not good, how come I'm not rich? But the technology bases and how people use the technology have changed. Things have basically picked up a lot of what we talked about in terms of personalizing. This interview we're doing now, you're covering on a laptop, you have remote cameras and systems that can all be put in small boxes. And back years ago when I was in college and I did AV work, this would have been 10 times as much equipment. I'm talking to you, and meanwhile I've got a phone that is the size of a large pack of cigarettes that I can run my company from a distance. So all those technical things are there. Where it gets cyberpunk is we still have giant corporations running people over. The United incident, for example, is a perfect one of, yeah, we're more powerful than you, so we're going to drag you off a plane. Okay, and you don't count. But we have social medias and we have things that are street level that once again, in a very cyberpunk way, change the dynamic between powerful and not powerful. So the answer is the technology may be a bit different, but how we're using it, what we'll do with it, and who our enemies are pretty much the same.
So has your point of view on Cyberpunk 2020 changed when you started to work on the game with CD Projekt Red?
Actually, I didn't have to change that much because they actually were as interested in preserving what we had done in 2020 as we were. Actually, one of the things I think surprised CD Projekt was, having worked in digital before, there were a lot of things that they wanted to do originally that I could look at and go, no, that would be the hard way to do it. We don't have to do it just the way we did it in the game. Here's a better or simpler way. And so actually, that's one of the nice parts about us working together is, since I understand digital design as well as tabletop, it means that I can be a lot more accommodating. In fact, some is more accommodating than they are about the changes we'll have to make so that it can be done and work in this particular medium.
Okay, so in your early days, you were a specialist for RPGs, for tabletop games. Do you think that those games are less popular today, or maybe just not? Are they less popular, or just people don't talk about it so much as before?
Well, it's a weird thing. I think a lot of ways tabletop gaming has gone underground. I remember talking to president of Gamma many years ago, and he was saying no one's doing tabletop, and my son and his friends were in 6 or 7 different tabletop games all at the same time, but 3 or 4 of them were online. They were basically done as chat boards, done as, you know, various online type of game structures. So I think tabletop is there. It's also important to remember that the hobby of gaming goes through waves. And I've seen waves where, you know, 20 years ago, maybe, they talked about miniatures gaming was dead. It was not going to go anywhere. Miniatures gaming is huge. Card games were supposed to be a non-starter, and then card games dominated. Board games were supposed to be totally dead, and board games and hybrid board games are now the most popular category. So what I'm seeing now is that people are discovering tabletop games, but what's happening is they're going to be different kinds of tabletop games. They're going to not be as complex. They're not going to have as many crunchy rules. And they're going to be telling a lot more about story, which is the thing that a tabletop game can do better. They'll also be augmented. They'll have resources online. When I run my games now, whatever the formats I'm doing them in, I'm using computers, I'm using audio-visual stuff. I've got mixtapes, I've got screen stuff. Most of the people I know are combining it, so tabletop is now more like a curated version of actually a digital game.
So, what do you think? What's the future of tabletop games? Will we have some screens that will holograms from it, or maybe what's your point of view?
Well, if you're looking at that, future's already here. Like I said, that phone over there, I use that. I have my Star Trek game, I have 2 Cyberpunk games, and some of the Witcher stuff on there, and I run it out of that. It has wireless components that will run screens, that will run sound. I have soundboards. I have a separate keyboard I use to activate things. So when I do a game now, it's not just talking through the game. I'm bringing in music, I'm bringing in stuff. People are seeing stuff on screens near me. And that's now. That's happening right now. What you haven't seen yet is a lot of integration of that on the actual producer's level. Many of the people who are producing tabletop are obviously working their way up from just putting out paper, because being able to do all the audio visual stuff is very expensive, and it's hard for new people to do it. We're kind of lucky. We can do figures. We can, we have our own printers, things like that, so we can experiment. But it's going to be, I think, a change for many producers, for many publishers to come up with the money and the time and the assets and the people to do things that are not quite going to be digital games, but will not quite be tabletop either. But it's coming.
Okay, you mentioned that you have a Witcher on your phone. What kind, is it a game or audiobook or ebook?
Witcher. Okay, Witcher 1 is a project, actually it's being helmed by my son and his own team. He wanted to do this. He came to me one day and said, CDPR has asked us if we want to do Witcher. And I said, I don't do fantasy, so don't look at me. So you get to talk to them and figure out whether or not you guys can put something together. And much to my surprise, he talked to everybody on the team back at CDPR and said, yeah, this sounds great. So I handed him the team and said, go make a game. And he's doing a really amazing job of it. But it will be tabletop. It will be integrated to have a lot of the things that are in the current Witcher RPGs, the video game versions. But it also encompasses things in the novels, in the comics, every resource that his team could find. There's one whole section of the office that's nothing but Witcher land. We have Witcher statues and maps of every place and hundreds of post-it notes and things plastered against walls that all are part of their teams putting things together while I'm running the Mekton and Cyberpunk teams. So it's going to be pretty darn Witchery.
Do you have any more information about this game your son is creating?
Let's see. Actually, he's actually in the convention right now, so you might want to hunt him up some point. But it is based off the Cyberpunk system to some extent, although Cyberpunk is mainly ranged combat, and he's had to work quite a bit to shift it into melee and man-to-man. He's actually kind of uniquely suited for that because he's trained in kendo, he's trained in Aijutsu, he's a longsword trainee. Basically, if there's a medieval level weapon out there, no matter what the continent, he probably owns it, knows about it, or has used it. So, there's times I'll go outside the office and he'll be out there with a Mongolian short bow practicing on the target range in the back. It's not only that, but his sister is just as crazy about that. So I'll come out and hear the whack, 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 and they're out there with poly weapons thumping on each other and then arguing about it. So he has spent a lot of time making sure that Witcher works not just from the standpoint of the games and the video games and the novels, but also that it is as realistic as what we try to do with Cyberpunk. When we talk about weapons in Cyberpunk, most of the team in Cyberpunk has used those weapons. We go out to weapon ranges in Nevada, for example, that allow us to use automatic weapons, and we shoot those things. So we know we own those weapons, so that we have a good idea, and we tell somebody what a gun can do. We're pretty sure it can do that. And Cody's that way with swords.
Okay, staying within topic of tabletop games and CDPR, will there be a Cyberpunk board game?
We're thinking about doing Cyberpunk board games ourselves. It may not be in 2077. To be honest, we're waiting, people say, when's it going to happen? What's going on? And I'm saying, well, one, I couldn't tell you anyway, but video game development is a really complex process. And as a result, a lot of times you have 5 or 6 different parts all moving at once towards a culmination, and we're beginning to bring that together now. I'm seeing some just amazing things. My last trip over to Warsaw last week, there was just things that I went, oh, can I steal that? That's amazing, So it's going to be pretty hot. However, it's early to decide whether we're going to do a Cyberpunk 2077 board game. However, tabletop-wise, for 2020, we're looking at doing a combat skirmish game for 2020. We've had it on the boards for years. It's called Friday Night Firefight. And we've been looking for a way to make it simpler and faster. And in fact, I've been talking to several dice vendors and other people around about some ideas we have towards that. And of course, you know, we are keeping 2020 in print. We're probably going to be doing an upgrade on it in a bit because, you know, the art's 20, 30 years old. And hey, it's time for some new art. And it's time for some, you know, upgrades and things like that. So for a board game, when we get a feeling for something that isn't going to be the usual miniatures game slog, we'll go with that.
Is it your first time in Poland? How do you like here?
Actually, I think this will be about my 6th time in Poland. I've been coming here for about 4 years. One of the things that many people don't realize is that, yeah, we and the CDPR team exchange and go back and forth between Seattle and Warsaw quite a bit. So like 3 months ago, part of the team was over in Seattle, and then 5 months ago, I was over here, and then 8 months ago, team was over there, and so forth. So I've been to Poland quite a bit. I like Poland. Great food, really fun people. The only part I don't like about Poland is that it doesn't have air conditioning and it gets pretty hot. But it's really a fun place. It is not what I expected. Most people in the United States don't know anyone who's been over to Poland. So I get a lot of questions when I come back. And what I tell them is, you know, it's pretty darn amazing and it's nothing like what you expected.
Okay. Do you know any Polish words?
Oh, no. Dziękuję is about the best I've gotten. One of the things that we studied when we were writing about languages in Cyberpunk is the fact that if your ear has not grown up hearing the words properly, you don't have the ability to kind of sense and hear them. So when I grew up, I was in the Midwest for a big chunk of my life, and there's a lot of people of Polish descent there. But the problem is they have American Polish names. So, you know, my friend Susan Grabowski, you know, it's Americanized Polish. So there are sounds that Polish makes that I can't even hear. Now, my son and my wife, because they're really big Witcher fans and want to be able to read the books, they've actually taken courses in Polish. So, you know, I know how to say please and thank you, and that's about it. And luckily, almost everybody I've met in Poland can speak some English, way better than I can ever speak Polish.
Okay. Speaking about books, the Witcher books, have you heard about recent Andrzej Sapkowski opinions about video game?
Cody's heard a lot more about it than I have. I deliberately stay out of the Witcher side, mostly because, you know, in the end I have to judge it and I want to be able to see it basically freehand. However, what I understand is that, you know, Mr. Sapkowski, you know, wasn't all that involved in it, which it makes sense. I'm unusual. I do this for a living. So I wouldn't expect him as a writer to show up and, you know, be following the video game. It's not necessarily something he needs to do or necessarily would want to do any more than, I don't know, George R.R. Martin would be managing a Game of Thrones video game. So, you know, I can understand his feelings about it. We're very happy with what we've put together with CDPR, and we're particularly happy about the fact that we can be so involved. Because normally, Cyberpunk's been on license for years. Many, many, many video game companies have held the license. And this is the first team we've run across that we can really work well with.
Okay, and how do you like Pyrkon? How it plays out, you know, among other conventions you've been to?
What surprised me is it seems to be a little bit bigger than Gen Con, which is the biggest one in the States. It's hard to grasp because you have it scattered between so many buildings, where Gen Con is just in 2 enormous buildings. A couple of things. One of them is you have an amazing amount of cosplay. More than I've ever seen in any place, even in the anime cons. One of our staffers is a cosplay photographer, and I keep telling her, you have to come out here and take pictures because you'll love it. And the cosplay is good. You also have a lot of space to do things that I've never seen elsewhere, like the entire LARP area, where you have an entire airplane in the middle of the LARP area. I mean, that's pretty amazing. So yeah, Pyrkon is very impressive. Pyrkon's really impressive, and I've already been running around buying all kinds of presents for everybody. I spent way too much money.
Okay, thank you. That's about.